Okay, so we're joined right now by Tony Montalto, who's the president of Stand with Parkland. Tony is one of the many family members who lost loved ones during the 2018 shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. And for Tony, that meant the loss of his 14-year-old daughter, Gina Montalto. Tony, thank you so much for coming on, and it's a pleasure to meet you.
Thanks, Jesse. I appreciate you helping us get the word out.
I want to get into the organization. I want to get into the initiatives that have been launched since you started it. But where I really like to just start is if you can tell us a little bit about Gina and what she was like, because I think that would be important for everyone to hear.
Thank you. Gina was my beautiful and wonderful, now forever 14-year-old daughter. She was our firstborn. She was friendly, bright, bubbly, kind and compassionate. She was the kind of daughter you really want to have. She was part of the Girl Scouts. She was a talented artist who illustrated for a local magazine. She was part of the color guard team at her school, which she loved dearly. And she was proud to be part of their national championship team in the fall of 2017. She was best friends with her little brother. She loved all her cousins and aunts and uncles. She loved to spend time with her mom, shopping and doing different things. And she would sit around with me and watch a football game if we needed to as well.
Was that your choice or her choice?
Well, I sat there and she would join me. She was a real, she loved sports. She played softball and soccer in the local leagues, flag football for a while. She had a competitive spirit.
And I always think it's important throughout all of this just to keep their names, their memories alive. And I'm very curious, Gina was, 14. Did she ever indicate what she wanted to do, what she wanted to be, what she was interested in?
Well, she was interested in a lot. She was, as I said, a straight A student. She was interested in STEM subjects. She was interested in art. She did both also, in her free time. The only thing she ever mentioned to my wife and I was possibly a Disney Imagineer. And she certainly had the artistic talent and the math skills to pursue that had she chosen to. But she was just a freshman. She hadn't settled down on a career choice.
I'm sure she would have been an amazing Imagineer. I said this to you before. I'm going to say it again. My heart goes out to you and your family, Tony.
Thank you.
There's no words, and for all of us here at Law&Crime, we wish you and your family the absolute best. I do want to get into your organization. So if you can just start off by talking a little bit about what Stand with Parkland is about and what the mission objective is.
Sure. So Stand with Parkland, the National Association of Families for Safe Schools, was formed by the families that had a loved one taken from them in the Parkland tragedy. We realized that the status quo didn't work, failed us that day. We came together to look at school safety in a uniquely inclusive, nonpartisan way. We look at school safety with what we call the school safety triad, which involves improving the security of the campus, improving mental health screening and support programs, and finally, if you choose to own one, ensuring responsible firearms ownership. All three of those things failed our families here in Parkland, and sadly, we just saw all three of those things fail the families in Uvalde, Texas as well.
I was going to ask you that when Uvalde broke, what was your thought process? What did the organization do when the news broke? Because, I'm sure when you saw that, you probably said, how did this happen?
Well, sadly, we strongly suspect how it happened, right? We've seen way too many of these, and we've tried to get out the word about how to help prevent them. When the news of the tragedy in Uvalde happened, my family and pretty much all the families were taken right back to February 14th of 2018, knowing the pain that the parents and family members of the teachers were going to be in Uvalde. The unbelievable hours waiting to hear about the fate of your loved one. The task as parents have to choose a coffin for their children. It was a terrible time. Fortunately, we had been working on school safety issues through, of course, our home state of Florida, many other states around the country, and in Washington, D.C. for the last 4 years. Took us a while to get started because we were all devastated from the loss of our loved ones. But once we realized that we had a voice, we were determined to use it to try and bring pragmatic solutions together, to bring people to the middle, the political middle, which hasn't been heard lately, while the left and the right scream at each other over our heads. We wanted to be the voice of people in the middle, the people who can listen to one another, find a compromise position, and then take that position to our elected leaders. That's what we were able to do here in Florida. It's what we've been able now to do in Washington, D.C. With the passage of the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act.
Can you talk to us about that act? And also, my understanding is there's the Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School Public Safety Act, as well as the Parents Need to Know initiative. I think these are all important programs, and I think these are all important legislative acts. If you can walk us through what they mean and what they mean moving forward starting today.
Okay, well, I'm going to have to do a little rewind and go back to the Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School Public Safety Act. That was passed here in Florida with bipartisan support through a Republican-controlled legislature with a Republican governor, then Governor Rick Scott. But our leaders in Florida, they knew they couldn't let the tragedy at Marjory Stoneman Douglas pass without making some change. So they were able to reach across the aisle, to work together, to find a compromise position. And that first bill, the Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School Public Safety Act, addressed the three things that Stand with Parkland came to call our school safety triad. It provided increased funding for securing the campus. It also required an armed individual on each campus in our K through 12 schools. At the time, not a teacher. Stand with Parkland supports an armed individual on campus, but we do not support arming teachers. Additionally, the Stoneman Douglas bill provided money for more mental health counselors in our school system. And then it also provided for a 3-day waiting period to purchase a firearm in the state. It increased the age to purchase from 18 to 21. And it included a red flag law provision or extreme risk protection order. That's some of the most proactive material that's out there and available right now. So if someone is deemed a threat to themselves or others, law enforcement has a tool to remove the firearms prior to them resorting to violence. It gives people a chance to recoup and recover and get the help they need. Sadly, we saw the individual who murdered my daughter, her 13 classmates, and her 3 teachers have over 40 visits from law enforcement prior to the shooting. Yet they had no mechanism to legally remove the firearms from his possession. Since that law has been passed, it's been used over 8,000 times here in the state of Florida. I'm sure with a number that large, we've prevented tragedy and saved many lives here. Yet it's important to remember, people are still allowed to defend themselves here in Florida. People are still hunting here in Florida. The sky has not fallen with red flag laws. but we have been made safer. So after that first bill here in Florida, we've seen some form of school safety, mental health legislation pass in the next 5 sessions. We saw Senate Bill 7030, which had some recommendations from the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School Public Safety Commission, which is investigating the Parkland tragedy and charged with making recommendations to our legislature. We saw the alert system law, the Alyssa law, named after Alyssa Alhadeff, which provides for either a panic button app or a hardwired panic button in our schools here in Florida to help alert first responders if there's an event. It's not a standalone piece. But it is part of an overall comprehensive package. The next year we saw SB 590 address some mental health issues, as well as the Parents Need to Know initiative that you mentioned. The Parents Need to Know initiative was the brainchild of Phil and April Shentrup, who had their daughter Carmen murdered in Parkland. It basically is an outgrowth of what we saw during the investigation here, that the school professionals knew about the shooter and how dangerous he was. The mental health professionals knew about how dangerous he was. Law enforcement, as I said, had visited him over 40 times, but they weren't able to connect the dots, and nobody warned the parents. Nobody told the parents that there was a potential threat to the school out there. In our civil cases, the judge ruled that there was no duty to warn by the schools. So we said, that's a loophole that needs to be closed. So we worked with Chairman Latvala and the House Education Committee, and we were able to get the Parents Need to Know initiative through, which requires schools to notify parents of a threat to the school, to school transportation, or to school-sponsored events. It requires that notification in a timely manner. And it's not to identify an individual. It's just to let them know that a threat's been made and what, if any, mitigating efforts have been done. And there's a short, focused list of offenses that are on that. So it's not going to be just if 2 kids fight. You know, it's more geared towards larger issues, active assailant threats or bomb threats, things like that. So we got that through, and then we've seen Florida kind of lead the way, and we were able to get Congressman Christ and Congressman Deutsch to introduce a federal version of the Parents Need to Know bill. And this isn't so outlandish. It actually is very similar to a federal law called the Clery Act, which controls what colleges have to tell parents, what threats are available there, and let them know in a timely manner as well what's out there, or they lose federal funding. So we're hopeful to find this finds a way either into federal law for K through 12 schools or into federal policy. Florida, just this year, 2022, we were able to pass 2 bills that had Stand With Parkland support. And the first one was HB 1421. And that's a large package of school safety initiatives, including something very important to our families, which is requiring each school district to have a model reunification program in place, because the reunification attempt that was made after the Parkland tragedy was very disjointed and very painful. So we're hopeful that by requiring at least a plan to be in place, organizations, first responders, as well as school districts will be able to handle that in a more efficient manner should tragedy strike. It's also got a requirement for each school safety officer to go through crisis intervention training. it's got a requirement that 80% of school personnel have to have specialized mental health training by the start of, I believe, next year. And then additionally, we passed HB 899, which is regarding student mental health. It requires students that are receiving mental health services from the school to make sure that their parents know about, or their guardians know about, additional services that are already available in the area, should they need outside services. It also addresses a need that if while the school is visiting with the parents or guardians, they notice that the parents might be able to take advantage of some of the services in the area, or some other family member, an older or younger sibling. It requires that notification as well. But most importantly for us, we were able to work again with Chair Latvala, Representative Hunchofsky here in Florida. She's our local representative, who was also the mayor of Parkland. We worked with Chairman Gruters over on the Senate side of the Education Committee, and we got the district-wide mental health coordinator position in. And that district-wide mental health coordinator is very important to help close a gap. And that was a gap that the shooter, in our case, fell through. He was getting a lot of services, but no one made sure he was on a path to success. So we're hopeful that this single person, one person in charge, will be able to work with both the school district school safety specialist and the superintendent and the Office of Safe Schools to make sure that the students that are receiving services within the district are on the path to the best possible outcome. But we need somebody to have that oversight and watch, especially the students that have gone through a behavioral threat assessment process, where they had exhibited concerning behaviors. They went through the process. They've been matched with services to get them the help they need. So we need someone just making sure that they're on track for that best possible outcome. And that's been a real great extent of what we've done here in Florida. In New Jersey and New York, we've seen the ELISA law pass on the state levels. We worked in Virginia this year to introduce a bill, and we were testifying in Pennsylvania on some school safety efforts that we've done here, trying to help them see what they could use in other states. So that covers a lot of our state stuff. I might have left some stuff out, and I apologize if it was long-winded, but it's been 4 years of it's been an active time for 4 years. Our families aren't just sitting by. We write letters. We visit legislators in their offices, in their districts. We go and testify about the need and purpose for these bills, sharing the sad story of how the system failed our children or our spouses, and why the need to make these changes is there.
And so the work that you do and what you just described is incredible. And one of the reasons that I'm fortunate to speak to you is because we do want to educate people as to what is happening across the country and the work that you're doing. Now, having said that, you became an expert in this, clearly, and never wanted to be an expert in it. You were put into a terrible circumstance. There are parents all across the country right now who might not be familiar with what's happening in their state or what their school policy is, but they're going to send their children to school. What should they do? What should they be thinking about? Who should they contact? And if there are problems, if there are lapses at the school policy level, who do they speak to? So you have a parent, obviously they're nervous about sending their children to a school. Can you give some steps on what they should do, what they should be thinking about, and maybe who to speak to?
Sure. Well, we understand that, a school safety conversation is difficult to start. So what we've done at Stand With Parkland on our website, standwithparkland.org, we have a list of 5 questions every family should ask as the school year begins. And those questions are really just conversation starters to see if your school, for instance, has a plan for an active shooter. Here in Parkland, they didn't even have a plan. But yet we were an A school. We lived in the safest city in the state, but there was no plan what to do for an active assailant. So we want parents to become involved, to be able to have knowledgeable conversations. So with those 5 questions, if you sign up on our website for free of charge, we're going to send you the answers you should expect to hear. But you need to start a conversation with your teachers, your school administrators, your local school board. And you have to force them to give you a real answer. Involve parents. As we said, with the Parents Need to Know initiative, that's part of Involve Parents. The 5 questions are conversation starters, and we need parents or guardians to be involved. We need our teachers to realize that they can't just be bystanders either. Sadly, teachers are murdered as well in these school shootings. And we would like to see some more support, quite frankly, for school safety from the teachers' unions around the country. We need that. So I think just having an interest, having a healthy skepticism to talk to the school professionals and make sure that they're working with either the school law enforcement or local law enforcement to make sure that everybody has a plan. Because the one thing that every community that's had a school shooting has in common is the fact they didn't believe it could happen there.
And so when you say that, the passage of an act prevented 8,000, it had 8,000 incidents that were reported, I mean, that's a real number. And so when you have this conversation, right, people will say, no matter everything you do, there are just things that are going to slip through the cracks, and it's just inevitable for the next shooting. And I hate when people say that. It really bothers me. I don't like to live in that world. I like to live in a world where you can say, maybe not right now, but one day we can get to a place where everything, or close to everything, can be prevented. Do you imagine that happening? I mean, again, we had this conversation even when 9/11 happened, and it was kind of a wake-up call to terrorism. And there were steps that were taken to make sure nothing like that ever happened again. And so it becomes a conversation, can we get to a place where there will never be another school attack, school shooting, anything like that? Or is it a reality that there are just certain things that you just can't control?
Well, I think it's a combination of answers, right? I'm an airline pilot by trade. I know the changes that were made to the transportation system after 9/11. I know the changes that have been made in aviation to keep passengers safe. Sadly, many of those laws are written in blood. Here regarding school safety, we see the impetus to pass something after tragedy strike. Again, giving us that Bipartisan Safer Communities Act after the tragedy at Uvalde. We'll talk some more about that in a minute. But, everything, there's no magic wand to wave and make this perfect. There's no one thing we could change to stop school shootings. It's a combination of factors. It's a multi-layered approach. That's why Stand with Parkland talks about this and that and that. It's an and approach. It's not a one thing, right? We need to have a single point of entry in our schools. We need not to build our schools that look like prisons because they're schools. Kids should be happy. We have to find that balance, that combination. We need to have better mental health screening and support programs so that children don't feel threatened in their schools and feel like they need to bring weapons to their schools, right? But we also, at the same time, need to lock the doors to the classrooms. Some simple, basic steps. But it's all these things. We need parents involved. We need the schools working together with law enforcement. We need our mental health professionals in the community to step up. And that brings me to the most proactive tool we have to stop school shootings. And that is the behavioral threat assessment and management model. Myself and Ryan Petty, who's a board member here at Stand with Parkland, and Max Schachter, who's one of our members, we toured the nation in 2019 and 2020 with the National Threat Assessment Center team, which is part of the U.S. Secret Service. And we went to 4 cities, Washington, Chicago, Los Angeles, and then back here in Miami, as we told our sad stories about what had happened to our children. And then the NTAC folks talked about their Protecting America Schools report, which came out in 2019. And they talked about the concerning behaviors that are exhibited by school attackers. And they talked about how to recognize them early and the importance of bringing together a multidisciplinary threat assessment team. Brings together our school professionals, our law enforcement folks, and our mental health professionals. And the idea of this multidisciplinary team is not to punish, it's not to incarcerate, it's not to stigmatize. It's to take a student who's exhibiting troubling behaviors and then get them the help they need before they resort to violence. And the idea is to intervene long before there's any law enforcement action. To my knowledge, no one's been arrested after a behavioral threat assessment unless they had a firearm on them. And then they should be arrested if they have a firearm in school. But the rest of the time, it's the way you take someone who's exhibiting troubling behavior and match them with our programs that are in place to get them the help they need, again, before they resort to violence. And then, as we talked about with the mental health, district-wide mental health coordinator, we need to make sure somebody's keeping track of the progress of these children so that they're, again, going to be on the best possible outcome. Some are going to be in specialized programs or getting, mental health counseling for a short time, for a short-term problem. Some are going to need longer term, right? And really probably shouldn't be allowed back in the mainstream. But it's the idea of how do we identify the students that need the help? How do we match them with the help that's available? And that's what the behavioral threat assessment process is really about. It's not, again, it's much more positive than the name sounds. And the monitoring piece on the back end and management is so important to make sure, again, that our children are on track to be good citizens, which is why we send them to school.
Tony, this all makes sense to me. Have you seen pushback, and what is that pushback look like, and why?
Well, we get some pushback from the left side of the political spectrum on this, and we've asked why. We've seen letters they put out, and they tell some, anecdotal tales of failures here. But really, they have no meat to them to systemic changes that should be in place. So we've tried to talk to them, and we've had our legislators, our offices that we work with, reach out and give them the bills that we're trying to pass, and say, well, what changes would you make here? And they don't come back with any. We need people to stop looking at the extremes is basically what the problem is. And this is for the left and the right. We get a lot of pushback on the right side when we talk about, responsible firearms ownership and red flag laws and things like that. So we need to get back to governing in the middle. We need to get back to looking at what will allow the best safety chances for the folks in the middle, and then come back and deal with the fringe cases where people are concerned. We don't minimize anybody's concerns, but we also can't let perfect be the enemy of the good. Again, we need this stepping stone process to try and get things done. And although Florida has done a great job of leading the way nationally, we've had to go back and make some changes to, improve things. And, I think that, but the idea of doing nothing is unacceptable. The idea of, well, it's not going to be perfect, so we won't do anything. We have to stop that thinking. We have to come together as an American family. If you go into a room full of Republicans and ask who wants safe schools, everybody raises their hands. You go in a room full of Democrats and ask that same question, everyone raises their hands. We have to start looking at what unites us here. We are the United States of America, and we have to stop bickering with the far left and the far right and start coming together as an American family to make our students and teachers safer at school. While we were in Washington, talking to legislatures and encouraging them to pass what became the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, one of the things that we said there was that the first bill is the hardest because you have to trust the other side. Well, they were able to find a way, trust one another, and pass and get into law the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. And then right after that, we saw them able to finally agree on a director of the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Division, which required some bipartisan cooperation. We just saw this veteran health bill pass with bipartisan support. Maybe, just maybe, the loss of these children in Parkland, Santa Fe, in Oxford, Michigan, and in Uvalde, maybe we've shown again, America, that we can come together to work on things and have Washington, D.C. start to progress instead of stagnate.
It's interesting you say that. So our organization was founded by Dan Abrams, who made that very point on multiple shows, that this is something that should be celebrated because the sides are so polarized right now that when something can actually get done, that's what should be remembered. And so the way you're speaking at it, I must tell you, is a breath of incredible fresh air. And sometimes people forget that it is the United States of America. So Tony, I also want you to talk about, we've been talking a little bit about bipartisan efforts, and sometimes in this country it's pretty amazing you can get something done, but we have seen some developments there. Can you walk us through it?
Sure. Just this summer, we saw the passage of the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act in Washington, which President Biden signed into law. This bill has Stand With Parkland's DNA written into it. It literally addresses making our schools safer. It has a lot of great stuff about mental health, and then it touches on some responsible firearms ownership provisions. It provides over $300 million for stop school violence grants and violence prevention efforts in our schools. It has over $500 million for mental health services and staffing increases in our nation's schools. It also enacted the 988 National Suicide Lifeline. This is such an important effort to have such a simple number to remember. Call 988. It's not too late to get help. It also provided money for states to pass red flag laws, which they call crisis intervention orders. Again, red flag laws are some of the most proactive tools we have. In the wake of Parkland, we saw 15 states plus the District of Columbia pass those laws. And we know they've helped save lives because they get someone who's been deemed a threat to themselves or others and have their firearms removed before they resort to violence. It's such an important piece. And to be fair, we should make sure that each of the laws that's passed does two things. One, has provisions for due process to be followed, and also has reporting to the NICS system, which is the National Instant Background Check system that they use for firearms purchases, because you don't want someone who's subject to a red flag law, say in North Dakota. I don't know if they have one, I'm just pulling states out, who's subject to a red flag law, or let's use Florida. Florida has one. You don't want someone who has a red flag law in Florida to be able to drive across the border to Georgia and buy a weapon. You need the restriction on having a weapon to be in that national background check system. Also, you know, right after Parkland happened, we did see some federal efforts to change and improve the national background check system through the Fix NICS Act and as well as the passage of the Students, Teachers, and Officers Preventing Violence Act, the Stop School Violence Act. Both of those passed in the spring of 2018, right after the Parkland shooting. So we have seen some federal efforts there. Another important part, though, of the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act was the inclusion of the Luke and Alex School Safety Act. The Luke and Alex School Safety Act is named for Luke Hoyer and Alex Schachter, two of the victims here in Parkland. What this bill does, this was the brainchild of Stand with Parkland as we testified before the Senate Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee back in 2019. We were working with the administration, the Trump administration at the time, to form a clearinghouse of best practices on school safety, along with its access point, which is schoolsafety.gov. This is really a one-stop shop for everything related to school safety. It's an all-of-government effort that brings together the Department of Health and Human Services, the Department of Justice, the Department of Homeland Security, and the Department of Education, all working together to curate information on this website. It has everything from how to help prevent COVID to how to change the culture and climate in your school so that children aren't threatened and don't feel the need to bring weapons. Additionally, it has simple things such as a list of quick things that you can do to keep schools safer, such as having doors that lock and things like that. It also has a readiness tool, so you can check your school's active assailant plan and make sure it's up to snuff. Should there be something that's that you need to change, it's a one-stop shop and has links to federal documents that show you how you can change that. Additionally, it's got a grant finder tool to allow school districts and schools to find the federal grants and federal dollars available to help you improve the safety and security of your school. It's really an impressive tool. And what the Luke and Alex School Safety Act did is put that into law now. So now it's not just operating under a memorandum of understanding. Now it's a federal law that this clearinghouse has to exist. They've been expanding the back end firewall protected portion where states can come together and give their best practices, right? And so schools don't have to constantly reinvent the wheel. We need to find a way to share information that works to try and make our schools safer for our teachers and students. So we're very pleased of the work and helping have created schoolsafety.gov and that clearinghouse. We've been in constant contact with them, and we're working with them to make sure that they have a solid list of things that schools can do with this federal funding that was secured in the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act.
Tony, I just wanted to ask you real quick whether any of that act, or there's any proposals on the table, is anything addressed towards social media or media companies in general? We noticed that there's so much activity on there. It always plays such a central role, especially young people. I'm just curious if you see any impact moving in that arena.
So on the federal level, not really, but it was addressed. I know when we were working with the Trump administration, they did bring in the heads of the social media companies to talk to them about it. We're working with the Biden administration as well, with the Domestic Policy Council, headed by Susan Rice and Stephanie Feldman. And we've been in constant contact with them about other ideas and furthering ideas. As a matter of fact, just this week, when we had the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School Public Safety Commission meeting here in Florida, which is still investigating ways to make recommendations to stop school shootings, they did bring up the need to start looking at some of the social media things. So we'll find a way. I think it's important to remember, if somebody sees something concerning on social media, don't just report it to Facebook, Instagram, or whatever platform you're on. Please contact your local law enforcement. Let them know so they can investigate it properly. That's one thing that we need to really encourage. through the research with the National Threat Assessment Center, in 2021, they put out a new report on averted school attacks. And that showed the attacks that had been, well into the planning stages, yet they were stopped. And it showed that our nation's students are most likely to see some impending sign of an attack. And we need to give them a way to report what they see, so they can keep themselves and others safe. One thing we did here in Florida following the tragedy was we passed the Fortify Florida, or part of the Stoneman Douglas bill, I should say, required the creation of a reporting app. And statewide, we have Fortify Florida. There's other apps around the state and around the country. We also have a company called Safer Watch here in Broward County. There's Safe to Tell out in Colorado. There's Safe UT in Utah. But what these have in common is they provide something on their phone, something many children, have in their hands a little too often, in my opinion, but they have it, and that's what they're comfortable communicating with. So something that provides a push button way or a text to warn people. That's something we're really working on. As a matter of fact, Stand with Parkland applied for a community funding project to bring a reporting app system to schools in the state of Washington, where Phil and April Shentrup have moved to. The state of Washington has wanted it. They haven't settled on a system. So we're trying to get some federal grant to be able to bring it out there and allow them to try the system for a few years before they have to buy, or until they figure out the one they want. This way they have something in place. So that, I hope that answers that. We do need to find a way to leverage the technology and harness the warning signs.
It sounds like there's plans being put in place to do just that. So Tony, you also mentioned the work that you've been doing with the National Threat Assessment Center. Can you walk us through what work's being done there?
Well, of course, they constantly do research and how to prevent these school shootings. One thing that we're trying to pass, and we just got word that it's come out of committee in the Senate, is the Eagles Act. And the Eagles Act is in both the U.S. House and Senate with bipartisan support right now. And what that would do is provide a reauthorization as well as additional funding to the U.S. Secret Service National Threat Assessment Center, so that they could continue studying how to prevent these school attacks, as well as they could go out and train in our local school districts, in our local towns, train the schools, the law enforcement, and the mental health professionals about how to do a proper behavioral threat assessment. It's so important that these things are done properly. We've seen many failures. Here in Parkland, they tried to do a threat assessment with just the vice principal without bringing that multidisciplinary team together, and it was botched, and it led to the murder of my daughter, Gina, and her classmates and her teachers. We saw in Oxford, Michigan, just in November, the school had the shooter in the office hours before the shooting took place. Yet the school professionals tried to handle it by themselves. They did not bring that multidisciplinary team together. Imagine if they had brought in the mental health professionals and they said, this is very disturbing action. We need to get them help right away. Imagine if the law enforcement folks had been in there and said, I'm a little squirrely about the way you're answering the questions. Let's go search your locker. Maybe those 4 students would still be alive in Oxford had this multidisciplinary behavioral threat assessment team modeled and used. Our educators in this nation are great educators. Our mental health folks are great mental health folks. But they need to come together. We need to work as a team to prevent these things. It's just what I spoke about earlier about having Americans come together to solve the problem. We need to not have silos of information. We need to bring a team together. Bringing the team together reduces bias. It helps have a more positive outcome for everybody involved. And that's why we hope that the Eagles Act, named after the mascot at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, will pass through the House and Senate and get to the president's desk for signature.
And do you think it's going to likely pass?
We're hopeful. We've been working on this for the better part of 3.5 years, and we were happy. We just got the news yesterday, as a matter of fact, that it looks like it's coming out of the Senate Judiciary and going to move forward, hopefully, to the full Senate.
It's fantastic. I mean, that, especially when there are clear warning signs on the surface, this is something that can be an immediate assistance and prevent something, right? I mean, that's what it sounds like more than anything.
Right. Again, on our website, standwithparkland.org, we have a resources page. And on that resources page, we have the reports, the 2 reports from the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School Public Safety Commission. We have the 2019 report on protecting America's schools, as well as the 2021 report on averted school attacks, that show how having school resource officers in place helped stop over 2/3 of the attacks that were studied in the averted school attacks. We see the importance of having everybody working together to identify folks who need help and then get them the help they need. We have programs, as I said, established through the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act to continue that purpose. Another important thing about social media that you talked about earlier, we had partnered with a company called Safer Schools Together, and a fantastic organization that helps teach digital threat assessments to professionals. So here in the Parkland area, we had some training back in 2020, right before COVID became a big thing, where we were able to bring together law enforcement folks from 5 different counties, where we were able to bring together the state folks as well as federal individuals to come in and attend that training, which got rave reviews because it helps them identify whether a picture online that they see is a stock image of a weapon or an actual image that somebody has of a weapon. And there's so many important factors that can be gleaned. We're really happy with the training that Safer Schools Together puts out there. And again, that's you can find some information about that on our standwithparkland.org resources page, where additionally there's information on safe storage of firearms. If you own a firearm, whether it's been in your family for years or whether you just purchased it during the pandemic, we encourage everyone to redouble their efforts and make sure their firearms are secured properly, which to us means someplace where it's not going to be accessed by children, as well as someplace where it's not likely to be stolen. All these little things that don't affect anybody's rights, but will make a huge difference. That's what we need. Again, that school safety triad, the multi-disciplinary approach, and everybody just coming together to make small changes will eventually make a big change in protecting our teachers and our students at school.
Tony, that was fantastic. I think you hit everything that I could hit. I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to touch upon.
No, I think those are the big things, but we need people to support the Eagles Act. I'll brag a little bit. I know we're still on camera, but Stand with Parkland was able to get just about 80% of our goals for this Congress through in the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. Some people in the gun violence prevention community aren't too happy with that bill, but it's an important first step, and it's a fantastic school safety bill. Again, touching on all 3 of our sides in the school safety triad. And it was done, in a bipartisan fashion. So we see that they're talking again. We see that they're accomplishing things. It's super important.
Montalto, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to speak to us. It's incredible work that you and the organization and the rest of the families are doing. I think it's incredibly important work. I think it's educational. I encourage everybody to go to your site, not only to learn a little bit more, like even just as a parent, to see some of the warning signs and see questions that you should ask. But there are also ways to donate to your organization and support it as well. So I just want to say thank you for all the work that you do. And again, once again, from all of us, our deepest, deepest condolences. And we can't say how much our hearts go out to you and the rest of the families. But thank you so much.
Thanks, Jesse.